The morning was chillier than usual for early October in that small New England town. A brittle wind stirred the amber leaves on the cracked pavement outside the shelter. The sky was a heavy gray, pregnant with the threat of rain, but it hadn't broken yet. Inside the shelter, the silence was different, softer, heavier somehow, as if the walls were holding their breath, waiting. Emma sat on a creaky wooden bench near the entrance, her fingers nervously twisting the hem of her sweater. Her breath came in slow, shallow puffs, visible in the cool air, and she watched the door swing open and close again, letting in a faint rush of wet leaves and cold from outside. She wasn't sure why she was here, exactly. Not really. The shelter smelled like bleach and fur and canned tuna. It smelled like hope that had worn thin, but hadn't given up yet. The past year had folded over her life like a shadow. When her mother died 6 months ago, the quiet house Emma had shared with her for 20 years suddenly felt vast and empty. The rooms echoed with memories, her mother's laughter, the soft clink of teacups, the faint scent of lavender soap. But all that was gone now, replaced by silence and the gnawing ache of loss. Emma wasn't ready to move back into her apartment in the city yet, not after losing her anchor. Instead, she had taken a leave from work and come home to the town where she grew up. She thought maybe a visit to the shelter would help. Maybe the presence of a living creature could fill some of the space inside her. She had always been a cat person. Her mother's old tabby, Midge, had disappeared not long after the funeral. Emma had looked everywhere. Flyers, the neighbors, the woods behind the house. But Midge was gone, and the silence only grew. At that moment, the shelter volunteer led a small, scrappy cat from a back room. The cat moved slowly, cautiously, her coat mottled with faded ginger and white patches, as if she had lived a hard life. Her fur was a little rough around the edges, a little dull. She had a jagged scar above her left eye, almost hidden beneath the fine, uneven strands of fur. Emma's eyes locked on the cat's pale green eyes, sharp, wary, but oddly bright. The cat didn't meow or make a sound. She simply sat on the floor a few feet away and watched Emma with a silence that felt like a question. The volunteer smiled gently. "She's been here a few weeks. Came in with some other strays. Doesn't trust people much yet, but she's been eating okay. She's special, I think." Emma felt something twist deep inside her chest. She shifted on the bench, trying to catch the cat's gaze again. The cat blinked slowly, a quiet, deliberate motion, almost like a promise. The air between them felt heavy, loaded with something unspoken. Emma had never believed in fate, but in that moment, it was hard to ignore the pull. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the old window panes. Emma stood slowly, the bench creaking beneath her. The volunteer stepped back to let her approach. The cat didn't move. She simply watched as Emma knelt down, extending a tentative hand. The cat's whiskers twitched. Slowly, ever so slowly, she inched forward, pressing her rough cheek against Emma's fingers. Emma closed her eyes for a second, feeling the small thump of a fragile heartbeat beneath the cat's fur. Something had just begun. The shelter was tucked away in a quiet corner of town, near the old mill where Emma used to play as a child. The building itself was a faded brick structure with peeling paint and a sagging roof. The faded sign out front read, "Paws and Heart's Animal Rescue," but the paint was so chipped it was nearly illegible. Inside, the place smelled like a mix of animals, cleaning supplies, and the faint undertone of dried tears. Emma hadn't planned to come to the shelter that morning. She had woken up feeling raw and hollow, the kind of emptiness that no amount of distraction could fill. After a long night of staring at the ceiling, she threw on a sweater and walked without much thought, her feet carrying her to the place where she'd left part of her childhood behind. When she arrived, the shelter was quiet. A couple of volunteers moved slowly through the rooms, cleaning cages and filling bowls. A dog barked in the distance, but mostly there was a heavy stillness, a waiting. Emma didn't know why she felt drawn to the cat in the back room. The other cats were loud and eager for attention, weaving between legs and meowing loudly for treats. But this one sat apart, still, watching. Her eyes were the first thing Emma noticed, a pale, almost translucent green, like sea glass caught in sunlight. They held a wary intelligence, a quiet strength born of survival. A scar marred the fur above one eye, thin and jagged like a story no one had asked to hear. The cat's body was lean, but not fragile. Her movements were deliberate, almost cautious, like she had learned to move through the world quietly, avoiding danger whenever possible. When Emma knelt and reached out, the cat didn't flee. She simply pressed her head into the offered hand, her purr low and hesitant, a rumble of trust earned slowly. Emma felt a lump rise in her throat. It had been so long since she'd touched something so alive, so uncertain, so quietly brave. The cat didn't have a name yet. The volunteer told Emma she'd been called Ginger for now, but there was a reluctance in the volunteer's voice, like even she wasn't sure what the cat's true story was. Emma thought of Midge, her mother's old tabby who had disappeared after the funeral. She thought of the empty rooms and the nights filled with silence. She thought of the ache in her chest that no medicine or time seemed to soothe. And as the wind howled softly outside, Emma knew that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't ready to give up yet. Maybe this quiet cat, with her scars and wary eyes, had come back into her life for a reason. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a scrap of paper with her mother's handwriting on it, an old recipe for lemon cake. The edges were worn, the ink faded. Emma held it tightly, a silent promise. The cat blinked slowly. The room felt smaller, warmer. Something had just begun. The days that followed were slow, quiet, marked by small moments Emma hadn't expected but came to cherish. The shelter was no longer just a building filled with stray animals and faded hopes. It became a place where time seemed to pause, where trust was earned in crumbs and soft voices. Emma visited every afternoon, sometimes twice a day. The cat, whom she had begun calling Hazel, after the pale green of her eyes, watched from her corner with wary patience. She didn't come running like the other cats, didn't leap onto laps or demand attention. Instead, she moved with deliberate calm, like a ghost slowly becoming flesh again. Hazel's claws clicked softly on the shelter's cold linoleum floor when she approached Emma. It was a sharp sound, precise, a quiet announcement of her presence. Emma learned to wait for it, a tiny, steady rhythm that spoke volumes more than any meow ever could. At first, Hazel wouldn't let Emma touch her except for brief moments. She would lean in for a touch on the head or behind the ears, then pull away, disappearing behind the scratched wooden crates filled with blankets. Emma learned the subtle signals, the flick of a tail, a slight flattening of ears, the way Hazel's eyes narrowed or softened. The smell of the shelter shifted in Emma's mind. It was no longer just bleach and sadness. It was the faint scent of canned salmon and catnip, the dusty musk of well-worn blankets, the clean, faintly floral hint of a volunteer's shampoo that clung to Hazel's fur. One afternoon, as rain began to patter softly against the windows, Emma sat cross-legged on the floor. She pulled out a small can of the salmon pâté Hazel favored, the rich smell cutting through the air like a promise. Hazel emerged from her hiding spot, her eyes alert but cautious. Emma set the bowl down and backed away slowly. Hazel sniffed once, then dipped her head to eat, delicate and precise like a creature tasting something rare. Emma watched her, the soft clinking of Hazel's claws as she shifted position echoing in the quiet room. It was a sound that began to fill some emptiness Emma hadn't known was there. Her own breath caught in her chest sometimes. The way Hazel's whiskers twitched when she caught the scent of the food. The way Hazel's eyes briefly closed as she leaned into Emma's soft strokes behind her ears. For the first time since her mother died, Emma felt a fragile thread of connection stretch between them. She thought about the last months at home, the silence after the funeral, the loneliness that wrapped itself around every corner. How Midge's disappearance had been another quiet wound on top of the rest. How Emma had wandered the empty rooms at night, feeling like a ghost herself. Hazel, with her cautious steps and careful trust, was beginning to pull her back from that place, not with loud gestures or demands, but with the quiet assertion of presence. One evening, Emma stayed later than usual. The shelter was dim, the last light fading behind thick clouds. She sat on the floor again, reading out loud softly from an old book of poetry she had brought. Hazel didn't come at first, but then, almost imperceptibly, she inched closer. Emma could feel the subtle warmth of Hazel's breath as she curled into the crook of Emma's legs. The soft rumble of her purr vibrated against the fabric of Emma's jeans. The moment felt fragile, as if it could break or vanish at any second. But Emma held on to it, eyes closed, heart steadying. That night, Emma dreamed of her mother's kitchen, the warm smell of lemon cake baking, the old clock ticking on the wall. She dreamed of Midge sitting on the windowsill, watching autumn leaves fall like amber rain. When she woke, Hazel was there, her small body curled tight on the pillow next to Emma's head. Slowly, Hazel's personality began to shine through in small, unmistakable ways. She was curious, but careful, poking her nose into Emma's purse or batting at stray pieces of yarn with tentative paws. She was clever, learning quickly which cupboard held the best treats, and patient, waiting calmly as Emma prepared meals or folded laundry. She had a habit of following Emma quietly from room to room, the soft padding of her paws a steady, comforting rhythm in the house. Sometimes, when Emma sat at the kitchen table, Hazel would hop up and settle on the windowsill, watching the world outside with intense, silent focus. The quiet companionship was healing. Emma found herself talking aloud to Hazel, sharing memories and fears. Hazel never judged or interrupted, only listened with those steady green eyes. One afternoon, Emma found an old scarf folded on the back of a chair, her mother's favorite. She spread it out on the floor. Hazel immediately jumped onto it, kneading with her paws like a tiny baker preparing dough. She settled down, pressing her head into the folds. Emma sat nearby, the weight of the moment settling softly around her. The scarf smelled faintly of lavender and sunshine and loss. For the first time in months, Emma allowed herself to cry. Hazel stayed still, as if understanding that some silences were meant to hold more than words. Their bond wasn't sudden or flashy. It was the slow accumulation of moments, a paw resting on a hand, a shared glance, the rhythm of breathing in a quiet room. Emma began to notice things she hadn't before. The way Hazel's tail flicked when she was curious, how she blinked slowly when she was content, how she sometimes pressed her cheek against Emma's in a gesture of trust. Hazel's scars became part of her story, not marks of brokenness, but of survival. Emma found herself tracing the faint line above Hazel's eye with a fingertip, marveling at the quiet strength behind it. Some nights, Emma would wake to find Hazel curled at the foot of the bed, her body warm and steady. The soft rise and fall of Hazel's breathing was a balm to Emma's restless heart. The cat's presence was a light in the dark spaces Emma had thought would never fill again. One morning, as the sun spilled golden light through the kitchen window, Hazel did something unexpected. She padded softly over to Emma, carrying something small and wet in her mouth. Emma's breath caught. Hazel dropped it gently on the floor. It was a single yellowed leaf, the kind that had fallen from the old maple tree outside, the tree her mother had loved. Emma picked it up slowly, her fingers trembling. The leaf was crinkled but perfect in its quiet beauty. Hazel looked up, eyes meeting Emma's with a steady gaze. It was a simple offering, but to Emma, it felt like a message, a bridge between the past and something fragile and new. Emma reached out and stroked Hazel's fur. The cat leaned into the touch, purring softly. The moment surprised Emma in a way she hadn't expected. It wasn't just a cat bringing a leaf. It was Hazel reaching out, opening a door that Emma thought had been closed forever. For the first time in a long while, Emma smiled without effort. The shelter was closing for the day when Emma finally stood to leave. Hazel followed her to the door, tail flicking in a slow rhythm. The world outside was wet with fresh rain, the air cool and sharp. Emma paused and looked down at Hazel. "I'm not ready to say goodbye yet," she whispered. Hazel blinked slowly, then rubbed her cheek against Emma's hand, a silent promise, an invitation to continue the story together. As Emma walked away, she felt the weight inside her shift, just a little. The past still loomed large, but Hazel was becoming a quiet companion for the journey forward. Something fragile, something real, was beginning to grow. The weeks after Hazel brought the yellowed maple leaf were quiet, but charged with a fragile hope Emma had not dared feel in months. Hazel had settled deeper into the rhythms of Emma's life. Her presence was no longer a tentative flicker, but a steady flame. The old house, with its creaky floors and faded wallpaper, seemed to breathe differently. There was movement in the shadows, a warmth where there had been emptiness. Emma felt it in the small moments. The brush of Hazel's tail against her ankle, the soft, comforting pressure of a paw pressing lightly on her chest as she read, the steady thrum of the cat's purr filling the spaces between her thoughts. But life rarely moves in straight lines. It was a rainy afternoon when the first unusual thing happened. Emma had just finished lunch in the kitchen when she noticed Hazel wasn't in her usual spot on the windowsill. The room felt too quiet. The faint scent of wet earth from outside mixed with the sharpness of canned tuna, Hazel's favorite food. But the cat was nowhere in sight. Emma called softly, "Hazel?" No response. She checked under the dining table, behind the curtains, inside the laundry basket. Hazel was a ghost. A cold pang of worry settled in Emma's stomach. Hazel was cautious, but never disappeared like this. Emma's fingers trembled slightly as she moved through the house, calling again and again. The hours passed. The rain fell harder. By evening, Emma was on the verge of panic. Hazel had run away. The next morning, Emma awoke to a silent house and the same gnawing ache she'd known after her mother died. The world felt unsteady, fragile, like glass balanced on a ledge. Emma searched everywhere: the backyard, the neighbors' yards, the wooded patch behind the house. She posted flyers, asked neighbors, called the shelter. Each no answer felt like a slow wound. Days stretched into a week. Emma's hope thinned, but she refused to give up. One night, sitting in the dark living room with only a single lamp casting shadows, Emma found herself talking aloud to the empty room, her voice barely above a whisper. "Please come home, Hazel." Hazel had not just run away. Something was wrong. It wasn't until the 9th day, late in the afternoon, that Emma heard a faint scratching at the back door. She froze. The sound was soft, desperate, a small claw tapping against wood. Her heart leapt. She opened the door slowly. There, silhouetted against the wet porch, was Hazel. But she was different. Her fur was matted with mud, dull and tangled. She limped slightly, a cautious weight on one front paw. Her eyes, still that sharp green, held a wildness Emma hadn't seen before. A flicker of fear mixed with relief. Hazel stepped inside, dropping something wet and small at Emma's feet. Emma's breath caught. It was a tiny bundle of fur, a shivering kitten, no more than a few weeks old. Emma bent down, cradling the fragile creature in her hands. Hazel watched, her eyes steady and intense. The kitten's tiny body trembled, its mouth opening in a faint, pitiful mew. Emma's mind raced. Where had Hazel been? Why had she left? And why had she returned like this? With a kitten. Over the next few days, Emma tended to the kitten she named Maple, after the leaf Hazel had brought weeks before. The kitten's fur was a mottled mix of orange and white, and she had Hazel's same sharp green eyes, but clouded with confusion and fear. Hazel stayed close to Maple, guarding her, grooming her in long, meticulous licks. But she was still limping, and sometimes flinched at sudden noises or movements. Emma realized Hazel had been through something she hadn't understood yet, something traumatic. One evening, Emma sat with Hazel on her lap, gently examining the injured paw. The paw was swollen and tender. Hazel pulled back sharply at Emma's touch, her ears flattened in warning. Emma stopped, giving her space but feeling the weight of helplessness. She decided to take Hazel and Maple to the vet the next day. At the vet's office, the sterile smell and bright lights made Hazel tense. She hissed softly when the vet examined her paw, but allowed the kitten to be held gently. The diagnosis was a deep paw injury, probably from a trap or sharp debris. Hazel would need rest, antibiotics, and a quiet space to heal. Emma's heart ached. Hazel's wild past had followed her home. The vet looked at Emma with kind eyes. "Sounds like Hazel took care of this little one herself," she said softly. "You're lucky she trusted you enough to come back with her." Emma nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. Back home, the quiet house transformed again. This time with the sounds of kitten cries, soft purring, and the steady pad of Hazel's cautious steps. Emma set up a small nesting area for Maple with warm blankets and soft toys. Hazel stayed near, her sharp eyes watching Emma, but also allowing small moments of trust. A gentle nudge, a slow blink, a quiet purr. Emma found herself opening up, sharing the story of her mother's death and Midge's disappearance with a close friend over the phone. "It feels like Hazel brought something back with her," Emma said. "Something I didn't even know I was missing." As Hazel healed, Emma noticed the cat's behavior shifting. Hazel grew protective of Maple, hissing softly at anyone who came too close. But she also began to show moments of tenderness that surprised Emma. One afternoon, Hazel laid her head gently on Maple's tiny body, eyes half closed, purring softly. Emma sat nearby, tears stinging her eyes. The bond between them was a fragile, fierce thing, born of loss and survival and fierce loyalty. But healing was not simple. One evening, Hazel disappeared again. Emma's heart dropped. She found Hazel in the woods behind the house, limping and crouched beneath a fallen tree. Hazel didn't run, but stayed frozen, eyes wide with fear. Emma approached slowly, speaking softly. Hazel allowed herself to be picked up, trembling. That night, Emma realized the scars Hazel carried were more than skin deep. Hazel had been hurt, abandoned, and alone, but she had fought to survive, to protect, and now she was fighting to trust again. Emma knew she had to be patient. The days that followed were a slow, delicate dance of trust and care. Hazel still flinched at sudden movements. She avoided loud noises, but she also showed signs of bravery, exploring new corners of the house, playing gently with Maple, curling up on Emma's lap for longer stretches. Emma found solace in the routine, feeding, grooming, quiet evenings with the cats by her side. She began writing in a journal again, something she hadn't done since her mother died. On a page filled with shaky handwriting, she wrote, "Hazel taught me that healing isn't linear, that love is patient, fierce, and sometimes a little wild." The real challenge came unexpectedly. One rainy night, Emma heard a sudden yowl from the basement. She rushed down and found Hazel pawing frantically at the closed door to the utility room. Hazel's eyes were wide, dilated, frantic. Emma opened the door slowly. Inside was a large rat, trapped and struggling. Hazel hissed and batted at the rat with fierce determination. Emma froze, heart pounding. She realized Hazel had been protecting the house all along, guarding them in the quiet ways only a cat could. But the rat was dangerous. Emma had to choose. She grabbed a broom and opened the door wide, shooing the rat out into the stormy night. Hazel watched from the doorway, tail flicking. After that night, Hazel seemed different, more confident, less haunted. She let Emma pet her longer, rubbed her head against Emma's cheek, and even allowed Maple to climb on her back during play. Emma felt a swelling warmth inside her chest, a mix of relief and hope. But the scars, both visible and hidden, remained. Hazel's journey was far from over. One afternoon, Emma was cleaning the kitchen when Hazel returned. But this time, she came through the open door, carrying something small and wet in her mouth. Emma's breath caught again. Hazel dropped the object on the floor. It was a small, battered collar, the kind used for outdoor cats. Emma knelt to examine it. The collar was old, worn, and had a faded tag with a name barely legible. Midge. Her heart stopped. Hazel looked up at Emma, her eyes steady and calm. It was a moment that changed everything. Emma sat back on her heels, the weight of realization sinking in. Hazel was Midge. The cat she thought had run away, lost forever, was not a stranger, but the same old Tabby her mother had loved. Her scars, her cautious ways, her fierce loyalty, all pieces of a story Emma hadn't been ready to see. Tears spilled down Emma's face. Hazel, once wild and wary, now curled softly in Emma's lap, the familiar green eyes full of trust. The past and present collided in the quiet room, and for the first time in years, Emma felt whole. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of the heater, and the gentle rustling of rain against the window panes. Emma sat on the faded blue armchair by the living room window, the worn cushion pressing against her back, the soft cotton of her sweater slightly rough beneath her fingertips. Hazel, or Midge, as Emma had realized, lay curled at her feet. The patch of light from the lamp above caught the gentle rise and fall of her breathing, and the faint sheen on her matted fur glowed softly in the evening. Emma watched her. It was strange, still, to call her Midge. The name brought a wave of memories, afternoons spent watching her mother gently brush the tabby's fur, the warm weight of the cat in her mother's lap, the quiet sound of paws padding on the wooden floors. A memory bloomed suddenly, the morning after her mother's funeral, when she had opened the door to find the house empty except for Midge's silent absence. The tabby had vanished then, disappeared without a trace. Emma's chest tightened. For 2 years, she'd thought Midge was lost forever, and now, here she was, limping but alive, bearing scars that matched the ones Emma's heart carried. She reached down slowly, her fingers trembling as they brushed the soft fur on Midge's head. The cat lifted her chin slightly, eyes meeting Emma's with steady calm. A slow purr began, vibrating like a gentle promise. That night, Emma found herself unable to sleep. She sat in the kitchen, the dim light casting long shadows across the walls, and watched Midge move through the house with careful grace. The limp was still there, subtle but present, a reminder of the pain she had endured. Emma thought about all the nights she had cried alone, all the moments when the silence had felt too heavy to bear. How Midge's disappearance had been one more wound in a long line of losses. But now, the house was filling again, not just with the sounds of rain or the creak of old wood, but with the quiet heartbeat of life returning. Over the next days, Emma's routine shifted. She woke early to prepare meals for Midge and Maple, the kitten growing stronger and more curious by the hour. The air in the house smelled of fresh laundry and cat food, a domestic symphony of healing. Midge grew bolder each day, stepping out from her hiding spots to follow Emma from room to room. Sometimes she perched on the windowsill, watching the world beyond with the same intense green eyes Emma remembered. One afternoon, Emma found Midge kneading the scarf that had belonged to her mother, the fabric now worn and soft. The cat's paws pressed gently into the folds, her eyes half closed in contentment. Emma sat nearby, feeling the weight of the moment settle softly around her. It was during one of those quiet afternoons that the full depth of their bond became clear. Emma had just returned from the vet's office with supplies for Midge's healing paw. She placed a soft, cushioned bandage around the injured limb, careful to avoid causing any discomfort. Midge flinched briefly, then settled against Emma's legs, purring louder. Emma looked down and saw something she hadn't expected. A paw reaching out, tentative but sure, pressing lightly against her hand. It was a gesture so simple, yet so profound. It spoke of trust earned through patience, of wounds healing not just on the surface, but deep inside. Emma swallowed the lump in her throat, tears welling in her eyes. For so long, she had felt untethered, adrift in a sea of grief. Now, here was Midge, reaching out across the quiet distance between them, a silent bridge of love and healing. The days grew warmer, the promise of spring unfolding outside the window. The old maple tree, now bare, whispered secrets in the breeze. Emma found herself spending more time in the garden, watching Midge and Maple explore the world with wide eyes and tentative steps. Sometimes, Midge would pause to catch a sunbeam, folding herself into a warm, sleepy ball. Emma noticed the subtle changes, the easing of tension in Midge's shoulders, the way her eyes softened when she looked at Emma. One evening, Emma sat on the porch steps, a cup of tea warming her hands, and watched the cat settle on the worn wooden railing. Midge leaned into Maple's soft fur, and the two of them looked out into the twilight together. Emma's heart felt full, but the healing wasn't only for Midge. Emma herself began to change. She found the strength to visit her mother's grave, placing a small bouquet of wildflowers beside the stone. She told Midge stories of her mother, of laughter, kindness, and quiet strength. And Midge listened. Sometimes when the world felt too heavy, Emma would find solace in the simple act of brushing Midge's fur, feeling the steady rhythm of life beneath her fingers. The cat's purrs became a balm to her soul, a steady drumbeat of comfort in a world that had once felt too dark. One afternoon, as Emma cleaned the kitchen, Midge leapt onto the counter and settled near a faded photograph. It was a picture of Emma and her mother, smiling on a summer day. Midge's gaze lingered on the image, her eyes reflecting the soft light. Emma knelt beside the counter, reaching out to stroke Midge's head. In that moment, the room felt alive with memories and possibilities. The past was still there, but it no longer weighed her down. Midge's presence became a quiet ritual of healing. Emma found herself laughing again, at the kitten's clumsy antics, at Midge's occasional bursts of energy chasing shadows on the wall. The house echoed with new sounds, soft meows, the gentle thump of paws, the shared warmth of bodies curled together on chilly nights. Emma's heart had room once more. On a particularly bright morning, Emma sat in the garden with Midge nestled on her lap. The cat's eyes closed in contentment, her breathing slow and steady. Emma traced the faint scar above Midge's eye with her finger. The mark was a reminder of pain endured, of battles fought and survived, but it was also a testament to resilience, to the quiet strength of a soul that refused to give up. Emma whispered softly, "Thank you, Midge." The cat lifted her head, eyes meeting Emma's in a silent understanding. A connection forged in loss, healing, and love. That night, Emma dreamed of her mother's kitchen once more. The scent of lemon cake baking filled the air. Midge sat on the windowsill, watching leaves drift like golden memories. Emma awoke to find the cat curled beside her pillow, warm and steady. She reached out, fingers brushing the soft fur. And for the first time in a long time, Emma felt peace. The seasons turned, and with them, the steady unfolding of life. Emma and Midge grew into a quiet rhythm, a shared story of survival and hope. The scars remained, but so did the love that healed them. Emma often thought back to the moment when Hazel had run away after her mother died, when she thought all was lost. But then Hazel, Midge, had returned, with a leaf in her mouth, a sign that even after the darkest storms, there is always a chance for new beginnings. And in the stillness of the night, when the world outside was hushed, Emma knew this was true. Love, in all its fierce and quiet forms, has the power to mend the broken, to light the shadows, to bring the lost home. 2 years had passed since Hazel, or rather Midge, vanished from the quiet house on Elm Street, disappearing into a world both unknown and unforgiving. 2 years of silence, absence, and aching questions. 2 years of feeling lost. But time has a way of moving in circles, folding moments back into themselves, creating new beginnings where none seemed possible. Emma often found herself sitting by the window, watching the old maple tree sway in the gentle summer breeze. Its leaves whispered stories of seasons past and those yet to come. And there, beneath its broad branches, she would sometimes catch a glimpse of Midge and Maple, the tabby and her tiny daughter, weaving through the tall grass, their tails flicking in unison. The world had changed, but some bonds remained unbreakable. For Emma, the arrival of Midge and Maple was more than just the return of a beloved pet. It was a resurrection of hope. When her mother died, the house had felt hollow. The silence was so thick it pressed against her chest, squeezing the breath out of her. The loss was a constant shadow. Midge's disappearance that day had felt like the final fracture. But when Midge returned, worn, scarred, carrying a leaf and then a kitten in her mouth, it was a quiet reminder that life doesn't end with loss. It bends, twists, and sometimes circles back in the most unexpected ways. Emma's journey had not been easy. She had faced the jagged edges of grief, the lonely nights filled with unanswered questions, and the slow, painful task of learning to trust again. Midge, too, bore the marks of her own battle, the limp paw, the wary glances, the sudden flinches at loud noises. But together, they had found a way forward. Their healing was intertwined. Looking back, Emma understood something simple but profound. Love is not just about comfort or joy. It is about resilience, about showing up day after day, even when the pain is fresh. It is about the quiet moments, the brush of a tail, the soft purr, the paw reaching out for reassurance. It is about second chances. Midge's journey had been one of survival, surviving the streets, injuries, loneliness. Her decision to return home with a tiny life in tow was an act of fierce loyalty and hope. Emma had realized that Midge had never truly left. She had been fighting to find her way back, not just to a house, but to a family. The kitten Maple, with her wide eyes and playful leaps, was a symbol of that new beginning. Together, the three of them, Emma, Midge, and Maple, formed a small, imperfect family. They found strength in each other. Emma thought often of her mother's gentle hands, her soft voice, and the quiet wisdom she carried. Midge reminded Emma of those qualities in small, persistent ways. The way she would nudge Emma awake in the morning, the steady rhythm of her purring on restless nights, the fierce protectiveness she showed toward Maple. Midge was a living memory, a bridge between past and present. Emma's life had taken on new meaning. She found joy in the daily rituals, preparing meals, playing in the garden, brushing the cat's fur until it shone. She learned to be patient with herself and with Midge, understanding that healing was a process without a clear timeline. And in the still moments, Emma felt the presence of love, not the loud, overwhelming kind, but the quiet, steady pulse that holds us through the hardest times. One afternoon, Emma stood in the garden, watching Midge and Maple chase sunbeams. The warm light caught the scars on Midge's paw and the faint lines above her eyes. Emma knelt down, brushing her fingers gently through Midge's fur. "I'm glad you came back," she whispered. Midge looked up, her eyes meeting Emma's with a calm certainty. In that gaze was everything Emma needed to know. Love is patient. Love is fierce. Love endures. The story of Emma and Midge is not unique, but it is deeply human. It reminds us that loss is part of life, but it does not have to be the end. That sometimes, when we are at our most broken, something or someone finds a way back. That second chances come wrapped in quiet moments, a soft paw on a lap, the flick of a tail, the warmth of a sleeping body beside us. Emma's life had been touched by grief, but also by grace. She had learned that healing is messy, slow, and sometimes uncertain, but it is always possible. Midge's return was more than a reunion. It was a message, a reminder that love can guide us through the darkest storms, that loyalty transcends words, and that home is not just a place but a feeling, built slowly, with trust, patience, and care. Emma smiled softly, the sun warming her face as Midge and Maple curled beside her. The past was still there, but it no longer held her captive, because she had found something stronger, a bond that time could not break, a love that would carry her forward. And so the story ends. But it is also a beginning, a testament to the quiet power of animals to heal wounds we sometimes cannot see, to remind us that even when the world feels broken, there is always a way back to hope. Thank you for reading this story of love, loss, and second chances. If this touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel, like the video, and comment below with your own stories or thoughts. Don't forget to press the bell icon so you can watch our daily videos, stories that remind us what it means to be human, to love, and to heal. Enjoy the journey, and remember, sometimes the quietest hearts carry the strongest love. Love is not about never losing. It's about always finding your way back.